watching the Cox Channel. The State Chamber of Oklahoma's Business Roundtable, presented by Cox Communications. And now, here's your host, Fred Morgan.
Hello and welcome to the State Chamber of Oklahoma's Business Roundtable. We have partnered with Cox Communications to tell business stories and to talk about business issues. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have as our guest Jennifer Lepard, who is the new Executive Director for the State Chamber of Oklahoma's Research Foundation. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We'll tell our viewers a little bit about your background. You've got a very interesting history.
Yes, I've been with the State Chamber now for 3 years. Prior to that, I had worked out at the State Capitol on staff for close to 10 years. But since I've been with the State Chamber, I have handled healthcare, education, and aerospace and technology. And I'm still working on those areas, but I'm also very excited to be now, as of January 1, the new head of the State Chamber Research Foundation.
Okay, good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your family as well.
Yes, I'm a mother. I have 2 small children who I love, Madeline, who is 3, and a handful, because she is into everything these days, and then a 9-month-old who is a handful for a whole other reason. She's trying to walk and getting into everything. So we have a pretty happy home, but it's a busy, busy life.
Well, and you are a registered lobbyist for the State Chamber, and your husband, you're one of those unique people, who,
yes.
husband and wife, who are both lobbyists.
Yes, my husband, Sean Lepard, has been lobbying at the State Capitol for many more years than I've been out there. I think he's been out there for close to 20 now.
All right, and your education background, you have a doctorate.
In public health policy, yes.
Public health policy. And where did you get the degree?
I went to OU. Okay. So I went to OU all the way through. So.
Well, tell our viewers a little bit about what the State Chamber Research Foundation does.
Sure. It was founded in 1981, and initially it was just to sort of publish some of the economic research that we had out there that we thought was important for business, to try to tell that side of it. But as it's grown over the years, it's become a lot more proactive. There are a lot of really good policies we have in our state that are very good for the state, but the economic research wasn't there showing how well these things were working. We were able to come in and ask people to look at it. We want to be honest about what's working and what's not, but where there's a story to tell about a particular policy that is helping our state grow more jobs, we want to be able to do that.
And what are some examples of some of the studies or reports you've done?
Sure. In the past couple of years, we had a really good story on oil and gas. It really showed how important it is. I think we all know that, but to actually have down on paper how much it really impacts our everyday lives, our budget, how many jobs. Our most recent study had to do on healthcare and how important that is as well.
And not healthcare, not just to hospitals and doctors, but to everyone, including business.
Business, exactly. Hospitals have to see everybody who walks in the doors. Hospital is a business, just like everybody else. But it's never been phrased this way, but that's potentially one of the biggest unfunded government mandates, to say that whatever you have to do to help serve those who walk in the door, regardless of their ability to pay, you're going to have to cover that. While we probably wouldn't have it any other way, I think we all like living in a world where people can get access to care. It does mean that sometimes hospitals are forced to make some really tough choices on how they can keep their doors open, particularly in some parts of the state that don't have access to the population that we have here in the larger towns.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about healthcare later in the show, but right now you have sort of an exciting new project to tell us about.
Yes, OK 2030. The Research Foundation is really excited to start this new project. Essentially, we're looking out to the year 2030. We want to figure out what it is we need to be looking at so that we can be bigger, stronger, better between now and then. And that just mean us here within our own city or within our own towns. I'm talking about the entire state. What do we need to be doing to look forward?
Okay. And talk a little bit about, I mean, have other states done this?
Yes, actually, there's been 3 state chambers that have done a really fabulous job. Florida's been one of them, Indiana and North Carolina. All 3 have fabulous plans. And state chambers are really in a really great spot to do this because of the place that they hold within the bigger context of what's happening within their own state capitals.
And my understanding is like maybe even 20 states have already started this. And it's really sort of a strategic vision plan, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. It's something that is meant to take a look at where you are now. In most states, including ours, are good at a few things. Our state in particular is mediocre at a lot, and unfortunately, we do really poorly in a few areas.
What are some of those areas?
Well, we just mentioned a few of them. I think healthcare is one of the ones we all know. We're not a very healthy state, but on top of that, for education too. Who wants to come move to a state when you know you don't have access to the skilled workers that you need to help fill the jobs that you hope to have? We need to work on that.
So healthcare and education are serious business issues as well.
Absolutely. And I think part of it too is what I love is that we have some general ideas of where we might need to move, like where I just said, but businesses are the ones who know best. They're the ones that are out there and probably thinking, why aren't we fixing this or why aren't we fixing that? Healthcare, education, yes, but those areas that maybe we don't know yet. And that's why we want to go out there, we want to ask them and say, what can we do?
Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the process in a few minutes. We need to take a break, but the process is it's very intensive.
It is.
Isn't it? So
it is, absolutely.
So how long do you think this will take to put together a vision like this?
Well, we hope to have it done by the end of the year, by the end of the calendar year.
Wow.
And that's pretty ambitious, but we have some reasons for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, we believe that 2018 is going to be filled with people who are running for office, as we usually see. People usually have plans on what they want to do. We want to be able to help influence that because I think that the chamber is in a great spot for really 3 reasons. Number one, we've been around since 1926. We're going to be around for a long, long time. When you run for office, as you know, because you used to be in office, you can only be in there for 12 years if you're in the House or the Senate, or 8 years if you're in a statewide office. We can have a longer vision because of who we are. 2, we don't have to worry about the politics in the same way. There are some issues that are difficult for people to talk about. We can talk about them. And then 3, we have access to, like I said, some of the best minds in the entire state. Business leaders who are growing and developing jobs every day. They have a really good finger on the pulse of the issues that we need to be looking at for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Okay, so we're going to take a break. We're going to talk a little bit more when we come back about the process and who all is engaged in it and what you anticipate. So stay tuned. Come back to us in just a couple minutes after this quick break. Thanks. Welcome back to our discussion with Jennifer Lepard of the State Chamber Research Foundation. Jennifer, before the break, we were talking a little bit about the concept of OK 2030. Talk to us a little bit about the leadership and the process that you anticipate going through over the next year.
Well, we've already started a little bit of this. We've gone around the state and found some of the top forward-thinking leaders within the business side that we can think of. We have a steering committee now that's just over 10, and we're still looking to see if we can add a few others, but we really wanted to focus on those people who we think are not just looking after their own business, but looking after the entire future of the whole state. So that's kind of where we are right now. But our next step is going to be to actually have sit-down meetings where we're going to be meeting with 100 to 150 top CEOs in the state, asking them what they think needs to be done. We're going to take that, we're going to look at it, see if we see some emerging trends, and then from that craft a survey, if you will, and ask others who we couldn't get around to and get their thoughts and their input on what we're hearing. Once we have that broader business community view, we want to take the next step of putting that into sort of a draft plan, just some of the basics, and take it on the road. We want to go around the entire state and ask people, whether they're a business, if they're just someone who wants to learn more about what we're looking at. We want to bring them in the room and let's have a frank talk about where we're doing well and where we're not, and some of these ideas that we might have to help push us forward.
Well, there have been other organizations that have put together ideas and plans before. How is this different?
Well, I think, like I mentioned earlier, the State Chamber is an organization that's been around for a long time, and we primarily engage in politics at the state level. To my knowledge, it's not been a group such as ours who spends so much time at the Capitol fighting for all these policies every day that would have the time and the resources to go actually execute this. Putting a plan together is one thing, and I think we are going to be looking at all of those plans because there's definitely some really great ideas that are within those plans. But we're unique in that we actually have made our business for the past almost 100 years going out there and getting it done. And that's where I think we're going to take this above and beyond.
Okay. Do you think you'll be visiting with CEOs that, say, run multi-state corporations or national corporations to see what they think about Oklahoma as well and what needs to be done?
Absolutely. I think that's actually where we typically get our best input, because sometimes when you live in Oklahoma, all you know is what you see. But when you're talking to companies that might be headquartered in Seattle but have one operation here, they're going to know the reasons why they came. They're going to know the reasons why they would leave if something changed, and reasons that would make them stay here and even grow more. So sometimes that's the best. In fact, whenever I meet with anybody who's new to the state, I always ask them, tell me what it was. Tell me what it was that finally got you here and what it is that we can do to help you grow here. And I think if we did that in a more systematic way and put it down onto a plan, we might have something that can be very unique.
Okay. And I assume you'll be visiting with, partnering maybe with local chambers, economic developers, and others
Absolutely.
who have ideas about what their separate region may need?
Absolutely. While we spend most of our time working at this higher state level, it doesn't mean that we don't have information that is just as important or more coming from that very local level. The needs we may have at the state probably similar in some ways to what they're going to see, but I am almost certain that we will find some very unique challenges and some very unique, let's just call them strengths that we can find depending on where you look all across the state.
What about how do you measure success? Now, you said you're going to do this plan in 1 year. Do you anticipate it to be a continuing process?
Yes, I would say that one of the things too that I'm really excited about is that we're going to be following this plan. So we'll have the plan pretty much completed. I think it will be done by the end of, like I said, the calendar year. But we're not just going to leave it on a shelf and hope that something works. We're going to be, like I said, taking the time and the money to be putting that plan out there. But we want to see what happens. We want to have a baseline. What are the metrics that we think are important for us to watch? And then let's look at it again a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. And if it's not working, if we're not making progress here or there, maybe we can tweak it. But if we just put it on the shelf and never think about what happens afterwards, it's not going to be any more effective than any other idea that's ever been out there that just didn't have that part of the execution.
And do you think that a study like this, where you're constantly going back into communities, is going to get people to ask, why are we ranked low in this category, or why aren't we doing better here?
Absolutely. I think that Oklahomans have a lot of pride in our state, and I'm one of them. I was born in Oklahoma, but I grew up in Texas, and I came back to Oklahoma, have stayed, got my mom and dad to move back to. I love this state. But sometimes when you live in the state, you can be a little bit blinded to some of the things that we could do better with. Sometimes looking at those objective measures, how do we rank according to Forbes? How do we rank according to any number of other outside groups? We typically don't rank as the #1 state for business. We could do better. Let's look at what they're saying we're not doing well and take a really hard look at what we can do to fix that.
And you're talking about sort of like a dashboard that would show
Exactly.
where we're making progress, where we're not making progress, why aren't we making progress?
That's a great word, yes. I sort of envision, they've done this well in a few other states. I think you mentioned a few of the other states that have had a chamber who have done a plan like this. Florida, if I think if I remember correctly, Florida, for example, has a really great online tool. You can look and you can see green or red. Are we doing it well or are we not? Are we moving in the right direction or moving in the wrong direction? Those simple tools, there's just so much data out there. It's almost challenging for any one person to go out there and navigate through it all and figure out what we need to know. That's what we're here for.
What's the reception you've received when you've talked to people about this so far?
Oh, people are so excited. I think they've sensed our enthusiasm, and I think it's because, like I keep saying, the opportunity to be looking forward for our own state, again, a state I think we all love so much, is really unique right now. And people are just excited to have an opportunity to have their voice heard and a chance for us to make the state better.
Well, we've got you all pumped up, so we're going to take a break, let you calm down, and we'll come back in a minute with our discussion with Jennifer Lepard. Please join us. Hello and welcome back to our discussion with Jennifer Lepard, the Executive Director of the State Chamber of Oklahoma's Research Foundation. Jennifer, we've talked about OK 2030, but let's talk a little bit. You're a lobbyist for the State Chamber and you're working on a number of issues. Let's talk a little bit about healthcare and education. First of all, we had a big change in Washington, D.C., and while Oklahoma has not completely adopted the Affordable Health Care Act, there may be some big changes to it. What do you see happening and how will that affect Oklahoma?
Well, the Affordable Care Act obviously has transformed what is being done in healthcare across the country. In Oklahoma, we were one of the few states, not one of the few, but we were in the minority of states that did not choose to take the federal dollars to either expand Medicaid or use it in some other way. The place we are at now is, what do we do? Because the Affordable Care Act will most likely go away, but it'll be replaced with something else. Is that going to include federal funding for us to do something within, within the system we have? Is it going to be something within Medicaid? We don't know, but we know we have a problem. We have a healthcare crisis. So trying to find out what we can do. We have some excellent programs that were in place before the ACA. I think we are hopeful that we can continue those, maybe even grow them.
You talked about a healthcare crisis. Let's talk about that a second. We've heard from rural hospitals. We know just from reading the news that some rural hospitals are closing, others appear to be near closing. Number one, what is that healthcare crisis? What's the issue?
Well, Oklahoma has the third highest rate of uninsured in the country. So while the ACA has increased insurance across the country and even in our own state, it's not closed a gap for us. So when somebody, like I said earlier, needs to show up to the hospital for whatever reason, by actual federal law, they have to let them in the door, see them, and ask if they can pay later. Again, I don't think we'd have it any other way, but we have to acknowledge that that is a major unfunded government mandate. So if you're a hospital in a part of the state that doesn't get very many people out there in the first place, and someone comes in and needs a lot of care and doesn't have the money to pay for it, as a business, that's tough because you've got to keep the doors open. You've got to pay your staff. You've got to pay people who come in and bring in food, who come in and wash the sheets. There's all kinds of things that go around a hospital that is a business that I think people don't often see when they think about healthcare.
And while we know that some of these hospitals are closing and that's going to create some kind of a crisis, who gets to pay for that uncompensated care? Who pays for that?
I'm glad you asked. Business often does. What happens is because a hospital has to keep the doors open, they often will increase costs elsewhere where people can pay so that they can keep everybody employed. They can keep someone there coming and bringing in the food, washing the sheets, doing everything else. But when they increase the cost for those who pay, they're often covered by their health plan, which is paid for by a business. So the businesses are going, why are my healthcare premiums increasing so much? Well, often it's because they're helping to pay for those who walk in the doors who can't pay.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And,
Yes.
and that it's costing everyone. It's costing taxpayers as well.
Yes.
What do you anticipate might happen under the Trump administration?
Well, I think on the positive side, President Trump has been very much about letting every state have the ability to figure out what works best for them. And we're very fortunate in our state. We've had Insure Oklahoma, which is a program that helps get people who are uninsured some low-cost private health plans. We've had that in place since before the Affordable Care Act. We had to reduce some of the program because of the Affordable Care Act. My hope is that when the Affordable Care Act goes away, if it does, that we're able to bring some of that program back to its old levels, and that whatever we end up getting instead of the Affordable Care Act allows us to even let it grow further.
Well, I know business owners are watching this pretty closely because they end up having to pay those premiums many times. So we'll continue to watch, and we need to take another quick break, and we'll come back and continue our discussion with Jennifer Lepard of the State Chamber Research Foundation. Come back and join us. Hello, and welcome back to our discussion with Jennifer Lepard of the State Chamber Research Foundation. Jennifer, one of the things that the governor has announced her budget, some pretty big tax increases for business and for everyone in her budget. What do you like about the budget, and what are some major problems?
Well, I like that someone's trying to think outside the box. I think we all appreciate that right now, with the budget being where it is and where it has been and where it's continuing to go, we're still in the middle of a pretty big budget crisis. I do believe it'll get better, but I think where my concerns are is if we are taking some permanent choices to try to fill the budget hole now that are going to be hurting a business long term. There are a lot of taxes that were put out in the governor's budget that would be directly on a business. And while that might help raise revenues now, long term, that's going to hurt business, which brings in fewer dollars in the long term into the budget.
I think there are over $1.8 billion in tax
That is
increases
the
in the budget. Yeah, so very controversial.
Very controversial.
The other thing, there's a teacher pay raise in the budget. And you deal with education issues. And first of all, talk about why that's important to the business community, and what do you think needs to happen?
Well, business needs to have an education system that is doing a great job. Because it's hard to attract anyone to our state if they are concerned that they're going to bring their kids into a system that is not performing well. But B, those kids that are in the classroom right now in the 3rd, 4th grade, they're the ones that are going to be graduating and being part of the workforce in not too long from now. So we really want to see it do well. Teachers are a very important part of that. We are below the regional average by about $3,500. I think bringing it up to a regional average is a very reasonable thing to think about. This budget year would be a difficult year to do it, and that's going to be the challenge.
What about higher education? I know that a lot of jobs in the future are going to require college degrees. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, higher education is extremely important. We know that a lot of our jobs that we have here are because we have access to a workforce that has the skills that they need. Higher ed took a very sizable cut last year in their budget, and why I fear that could be ultimately very short-sighted is because that is going to help prevent the next group of people who go out and have the jobs. They're not going to get the education that they need to help fill those jobs.
Okay. So you're really excited about OK 2030.
Absolutely.
And how to our viewers, I know a lot of people have been asking, how do they get involved? So how would someone get involved if they want to look and try to help plan for the future of this state?
Well, stay tuned. We are currently working on getting a website up. It's going to be ok2030.org. But if you go there right now, we're not quite there, but look very, very soon. And I also, by the time this show airs, I think it might even be up, fingers crossed. I also would say just keep an eye on us. Follow us on Twitter. Our Research Foundation page is also on Facebook, and we'll be sure to keep you updated that way as well.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to hearing and watching this program as it develops and hearing more about it. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us on the show. We hope you'll come back and join us the next time on the Oklahoma Business Roundtable.
Thank you for watching the State Chamber of Oklahoma's Business Roundtable, presented by Cox Communications. If you have questions about this program, email the Chamber at okstatechamber.com. Set furnishings provided by Scott Rice, creating effective workspace from the floor to the ceiling and everything in between.